Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Friday Fireside Chat. I don't have a fireside this time because I am coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans. And I have borrowed my son's office. He's very thoughtfully loaned it to me for the hour. Notice how great he is. He's got all the books behind me. He's so on brand, which is great. Just remember, as always, this is being recorded, so don't say anything you do not want your mother-in-law finding out about and holding against you later on. My guest this week is Ray Wang, the founder of Constellation Research, hugely influential Silicon Valley mind, author of this great book, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, very on brand, Ray. And we're going to be talking about digital giants, digital duopolies, what's going on with competition, and maybe we'll get to meta. So Ray, maybe just start off with telling us a little bit about yourself and Constellation Research and what you guys do.
Yeah, well, I'm Ray Wang, and at Constellation Research, what we do is we look at trends. We start with a futurist format, looking at traditional PESTO, which is politics, economics, society, environment, tech, and of course, looking at where legislative environmental forces will play a role. And then what we do is we go and distill that and think about what does it mean in the business environment and how do you make people successful? Whatever they're trying to do, get a product out to market, think about where marketplaces are going, understand new sets of technologies, apply that to leadership approaches, thinking through how that actually means from managing those resources or acquiring talent in that way. So we provide that kind of strategy behind that. And so we're based out here in Silicon Valley. We actually just finished a customer conference this week, and really we attract folks that are in the middle of change, folks that are change agents, transformation agents, folks that are leading business changes and outcomes. And that's the profile of people and customers and clients that we typically work with. So, and anything in the global 2000 to small businesses that are trying to do something innovative or change things, especially in the startup world.
That's exciting. It's super exciting. And I was delighted to be on one of your recent TV shows. So that was a lot of fun too. So let's turn to the book, because I think it's very timely and the messages are appropriate. And essentially what you're arguing is that we're dealing with these data-driven digital networks, and that those have these sort of winner take all, first and second player does very well, everybody else is left with the scraps kind of models, and that they really are platforms kind of taking over various parts of the economy. So maybe just give us a high level overview of the book and what got you interested in putting this between two covers.
Rita, it makes a lot of sense. In 2015, I wrote a book about digital transformation called Disrupting Digital Business. Constellation started out in 2010 to really look at where digital transformation was headed and what the implications were. In 2018, we started talking to the companies that we'd say were pretty successful in putting digital transformation projects together. And we wanted to know what made them so successful, what was behind it, where the failures were, what were the lessons learned. And it kind of caused me to start thinking about, hey, what was happening next after this wave of digital transformation. So I started thinking about writing a book. And what we noticed was something very interesting. Among the folks that were very successful in digital transformation was a group that was an ultra tier. Mm-hmm. This was the digital giants. And we know them as Facebook or Meta now, Apple, Meta, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. And we were trying to figure out what made them successful. And now, if you were to look at the market cap of these companies, plus Microsoft, in 2017, it was $2 trillion. If you look at the market cap today of these companies, it's almost $10.5 trillion. Think about that. Never before in the history of organizations or companies, or even in capitalism, have companies quintupled their market cap in less than 5 years. Let alone less than 10 years. Let alone less than 20 years. This is crazy. And there's something that we're doing that was different. And so the book really starts about describing how do you actually think about what a digital giant is? How do you actually partner to compete against a digital giant? And then, of course, what do you have to do to regulate digital giants should they get too big, right? And so that was kind of the framework behind the book and the thought process behind what was, why we actually wrote the book, or why I actually thought, it's going to be very valuable to think about what happens next.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the most interesting things about the book is you really take a whole arc. You don't sort of say where we are is where we're going to be. There's a whole next step. Before we get to that, though, you did a recent interview talking about how these companies actually became so successful, and you lay out 5 steps to their doing that. And I wonder if you could kind of refresh us on those steps, sort of beginning with disintermediating the customer account control. I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with an example, and we normally talk about my favorite company in the middle of digital transformation was a company called Domino's Pizza, and they still exist. They do really well. Most people, I'm actually curious. I mean, if you're in chat, pop in and say, "I'd love to know how often do you order from Domino's Pizza? Do you order once a month? Do you order once a week? Do you order, I don't know, multiple times a week?" Just pop that in the chat because I'm very curious. Because what happened in the pandemic, and this is Domino's Pizza, think about it. Like, they were able to deliver. I mean, this is the poster child for digital transformation. There's 17 ways to order a pizza. You can order on Alexa, right? And I mean, and they have really good
You can do it on
systems.
Twitter. You can order on Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter, Alexa, every mobile. So they won the battle on digital channels. They got the business models and operations right because you can track the pizza from the time it's in the oven to 10 minutes away to 5 minutes away to 1 minute from your house. You get the pizza, you take a picture of the pizza, and the AI bot on the back end will tell you what the quality of the franchisee is. I mean, like, they've won, right? They've done a great job. And so, okay, once a year delivery, once a month. Look at this. Rita says once every 3 months delivery, right? Mira says once a year delivery. Okay, I mean, okay, let's be honest. Your crowd doesn't really order from Domino's Pizza. But how often do you guys?
I don't think we're the right demographic.
I mean, how often do you order from a food delivery app service like Uber Eats or DoorDash or Postmates? Who orders once a week? Let's start with there. And then I want to know who orders more than once a week and who orders more than once a day. Tell me how often you order, because I put that in the chat because I'm very curious. Instacart twice a month. Yeah. Once a week or more, says Shashi. Marianne says, I live in gourmet heaven, Sonoma. Yes, you do. DoorDash at least 2 times a week, right? Okay, so think about this. Small businesses who didn't have the delivery infrastructure of Domino's literally handed their customers on a silver platter to these food delivery app companies. Now, these small businesses had hundreds, maybe thousands of customers, let's be honest. They didn't have millions of customers. And pretty soon what happened was you gave someone you didn't know who was delivering food from someone you knew your credit card details. You started there when you started to order. Then you gave them transaction history, right? And suddenly what happened was they had customer account control. You're going to order food today. Where do you go first? Do you go to the restaurant? No, you're not sure. You look at genres. You look at categories. Unless you know, and whoever's out in Sonoma has like some great restaurants to go for. I mean, unless you know exactly which restaurant you want to go to, you go to the food delivery app company first. You might even call the restaurant and they'll be like, oh, we don't deliver. Go to DoorDash, right? So they've given up account control, right? And by doing that, they allowed these food delivery app companies to aggregate millions of customers and, of course, a bunch of sourcers. And that sourcing capability allows them to say, hey, let's go figure out the data and the transactional history. Here in Sonoma, Thai restaurants might not do as well as completely farm-to-table markets in the high-end market, right? Italian restaurants in my zip code might not do as well as Indian restaurants, right? And we start to manage that data. You can optimize supply chains, optimize delivery networks, and pretty soon you're like, hey, you know what? We'll build a ghost kitchen. We'll do like a Michelin star type ghost kitchen and send stuff out everywhere, right? And so they use that data to compete. And then more importantly, they have digital monetization models. We can do ads, we can do search, we can do goods, we can do services, memberships, subscriptions. And these companies
loyalty points.
Loyalty points. We have to get there. And we can lose hundreds of millions of dollars and no one cares. So we're growing our marketplace. In fact, we can keep losing that for years and years. And when we get to escape velocity, at that point, it doesn't matter. They can go out and pretty much they will dominate the market. And that's why we end up with 1 or 2 of these players. Now, if you're Domino's, what do you do? Right? Because if you saw in the last quarter, it's the first time in a very, very long time, year-over-year sales are down. They're getting eaten alive. Because if you're thinking pizza, you might not even think about Domino's. And if you're already thinking about pizza, you're already on a food delivery app choosing between 3 artisan pizza deliveries, thinking, do I want New York style, Chicago style, or Detroit? Right? I mean, that's where your head's at. You're not like, hey, I'm going to go get Domino's. Right? So this is what's going on, and this is how these markets get created. And those are the 5 steps: disintermediate customer account control, build the biggest network, compete on data supremacy, deliver digital monetization, and play the long game.
Well, and I'm going to stop there because this is something that I found just super interesting about this whole sector, right? Which is, and let's take Uber just as my poster child for a company that has distorted so many markets by basically subsidizing both the buy and the sell side of the platform. And they're only able to do that because people have been like shoveling cash into that company at a terrific rate. So one of the things that allows them to be long-term oriented is they've got this, infinitely deep pockets to play with. And, I always used to joke, I was teaching entrepreneurship in the late 90s, which was a really depressing thing to be doing because the rules didn't apply, right?
The rules didn't apply.
How you're going to make money? Nobody even cared, right? I've got a business model. It's great. And I kind of feel like I'm living in those days again where, there's so much VC money looking for, the next Facebook or the next Uber Eats or whatever it is, that it's almost like the laws of economics get suspended. But they're suspended for long enough for these things to catch a toehold or the dominant. They get a toehold first, and then they, as you said, dominate. And then, sort of artificially, they get to now occupy these really dominant positions. So it's kind of disturbing.
I want to build on your point because this is really the crux of the problem. If I take a step back and say, how did we get here? The source of all this evil is basically the quadrillions of money that's sitting on the sidelines because every government has gone into deficit spending and printed so much money. So the liquidity is out there. And so every organization is on a quest for yield. If you're getting 15% return, you're going backwards. They're expecting 30% return on their capital. So investors are saying, like, if you're not delivering 30% return, we're basically going to all strip out your cash. I want your money back in dividends, stock buybacks, or I want you to do mergers and acquisitions to get the efficiencies and economies of scale. And that's what's driving this, frenzy to go out and try something new. And so with all this cash on the sidelines, you're like, where do we put it? We put it in empty space, maybe real estate. We put it into startups.
WeWork,
right?
We put it into WeWork.
We put it into WeWork. That was empty space and a
Quibi,
startup.
Or Quibi.
We had empty space and a startup, right? I mean, and this is what makes it kind of fun, right? But there's so many opportunities for startups because of this, because the money's there. I mean, if you and I, Rita, let's go create a startup. If you and I wanted to create a startup, I think we could easily raise $50 million in less than 5 weeks.
Oh, between your brand and mine? Why not?
No, it's mostly your brand. I'll just hang it out. But we could create the startup, right? I mean, that's how easy it is. Now the problem is, could we execute? And that's where the challenge is, right? The talent is not necessarily there. The tech is definitely there, right? The question is, can we get the talent assembled in the right sequence so that we can actually execute and make it happen? That's going to be the harder part.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it's a fascinating time. And you point out in the book that the internet as we know it is about 50 years old. And when you think of what it's done, like just the waves of transition that it's led to, I think it's just absolutely fascinating. But it has these sort of consequences. And one of the things you talk about as a management necessity for if you want to be a digital giant, you need to have you're not going to be a democracy, you're going to be a benevolent dictatorship. Or benevolent, with cautionary terms, dictatorship. So talk a little bit about so let's say you and I decide to do the Wang McGrath startup, right? So how do you architect that? How do you think about what does your benevolent dictator do?
So I'll give you an example, right? The reason we talked about that is because we often think we can get into consortiums, and consortiums are going to be successful. We're all going to work together. We'll bring an ecosystem of partners. We're all egalitarian. Everyone's going to be the same, right?
Kumbaya.
Kumbaya. And the result, I'll just be honest, consortiums suck. There's basically maybe 10 consortiums that have been very successful around the world. They're very hard to pull off, right? And so this is hard. And so we use an example, for example, let's say you're in the commercial real estate business. You're CB Richard Ellis, and you're or Jones Lang LaSalle or Cushman Wakefield or any one of those big property managers, Boston Properties, and you go and say, we're going to do smart buildings. And you're like, okay, great. Okay. We'll put $150 million for smart buildings. When I see those types of announcements, I just have to laugh because I'm like, these are $2 billion projects. These people are pumping stock. I mean, there's no way you're going to succeed, right? Mm-hmm. And so we'll help them out. We'll do consulting projects. Everyone's going to come in and do their little thing. And then in 2-3 years later, the projects die, right? And that's just kind of what's been going on. And we went back and said, why? Let's go do something bigger. But let's not create a consortium. So the idea was, let's have someone put $150 million for a brand new startup. It's a joint venture startup model. And what would happen is you still need the tech, the talent. Most people don't have that. And of course, the capital. There are companies that are heavily constrained that will never be able to get into other industries going forward, but have lots of capital and lots of tech and really willing to help you out. So you take a company like Google or Microsoft or Amazon and you say, look, we want another $150 million from you. You're going to invest in this brand new joint venture startup on smart buildings. Now, why would they do this? I mean, there's a lot of great reasons. Dynamic pricing per revenue per square feet or meter. We can renegotiate power purchase agreements. We can do green building and energy management. We can do remote field service in these buildings as digital twins get built up. We have the ability to create ad networks and hyper-personalized shopping experiences. All great reasons, right? So they jump on. So we get $300 million for a brand new startup. We're still missing the ecosystem. Now, here's how the ecosystem plays. It plays differently, right? We're going to give you 1% of the company for $10 million, and you don't have any voting rights, right? You're not going to give you a lot of voting rights. At the point you have it, it's basically a dual class structure where, either the CB Richard Ellis comes in and has, maybe 10% of the shares, but 51% of the voting rights. It's going to be that kind of structure, okay? Intentionally, because we want them to go out and win and make fast decisions. And if you don't believe in them, I don't want you to invest, okay? So we have $10 million for 1% of the company. We go to Honeywell, ThyssenKrupp. We go to Otis. We go to Johnson Controls, Schneider Electric. And they all come in. They chip in. So we raised $500 million for a brand new tech startup doing smart buildings with an ESG focus. We're worth $2 billion on day one. What happens when we launch on day one? We're going to do a cap table raid on our competitors. If you're not in this ecosystem, your stock price is going to drop. Institutional investors are going to put your money in this new entity, which is a joint venture startup with a benevolent goal that's really designed to really change and build smart buildings. And what's happening on day two? Your talent's going to leave too. The top talent's coming over because this is the new cool and exciting project. So, all right, Cushman, Wakefield, Jones Lang LaSalle, hypothetically, if they're in this competition, they're not going to sit around and say, oh, we're going to give this up. But what they're going to do is they're going to create their own joint venture startups, and maybe even they partner together. So they raise $200 million on their own. I chose Amazon. They choose Google. Fine. All right. They raise $300 million, $400 million now for on their own. What happens when they go to the ecosystem? The ecosystem's like, whoa, we just gave our last $10 million in CapEx to these guys. Well, they're going to come back and say, well, what if they fail? All right, fine. We'll give you $1 million just in case if they fail, right? They're less capitalized from the ecosystem players, but they become the next number two. It's very hard for a number three to show up after that.
Right. That is
Now, this is what the interesting point is. Remember what we talked about earlier on the book? It's really about how do we get to these duopoly status, right? Coke, Pepsi, 40 to 50 years. Pizza Hut, Domino's, 40 to 50 years. Airbus, Boeing, 40 to 50 years to get to an oligopoly, duopoly status. What did I just do in less than 12 months in this race for capital? I collapsed the ability to go from small startup to regional player to, national chain to global market leader. And we pretty much collapsed the ability to get to duopolies in less than 12 months. Peter Thiel's correct. Competition is for losers. This is what happens when you actually create the ability to build duopolies in less than a year.
Wow. And of course, he's attracted a lot of buzz lately as one of the sort of geniuses or evil geniuses, depending on your perspective.
Evil genius, I was kidding.
But I mean, one of the interesting things he did was early on, people were saying, social networks. I mean, Friendster didn't make it and MySpace was a disaster. And I forget what the other one was that he was looking at. But what he realized, and I thought this was genius, was that people were sticking to those social networks, even though the technology was basically garbage. I mean, the things didn't scale. It was buggy. Stuff broke down all the time. And that's when he made the decision to really go all in on Facebook. Because he felt that they would be, I guess he had confidence in the tech team that they would be able to scale it fast.
Biggest advertising machine ever created, right? I mean, as we're talking about the topic of Facebook, when you think about what they've been able to do, 70 billion a year in advertising last year. I mean, that is crazy just on its own. I mean, they're the second largest ad player. Google's the number one ad player with 130 billion. But here's a great example again, Rita. I mean, you're completely right. Think about this. Social media dominance. We got Google, which is search engine dominance. The next closest player 5 years ago in the ad wars was like Microsoft, right? So about $1 billion in ads. Today, I mean, think about it. It's 70x bigger than the next closest player. Today, the third player is another digital giant. It's Amazon. They did something like 14.1 billion in advertising last year. If you look at a 12-month trailing basis, it's almost 24 billion. So three, what we would call dominant players, maybe monopolies, one in search, one in social, one in commerce, are competing aggressively for digital monetization in ads. Different business models, same monetization model. It's never been like this.
No. And what, as a society, one of the things I find concerning, right, is, to think that the best and brightest minds of your generation are going to programs to learn how to do better advertising algorithms. Like is that really where we want our best talent spending its, rare intellectual powers?
Yeah.
Amazing.
No.
Amazing. So let's talk about the company formerly known as Facebook. They've rebranded themselves as Meta. Well, now, I'll be very honest. I have been very uneasy about Facebook for a long time. In fact, in chapter 1 of my most recent book, I basically said, any company that basically makes its profits by fooling those that use it, by being untruthful, by not being honest about what they're doing or to whom they're doing it, I think eventually one hopes that there would eventually be a reaction to that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think people are trying to figure out what this is in the metaverse and the metaverse economy and why Facebook is so interested in it. To be honest, I mean, it's probably an 8 to 10 year project before we get to these metaverse economies. And so let's break it up. A metaverse economy is really the fact that we're taking our analog lives and creating digital representations in a 3D level, right? So it's more than just this Zoom call. There could be 3D avatars of us walking around, engaging, pretending to drink a coffee or buying a digital coffee somewhere else.
This is cherry coffee, by the way.
Ooh, yes.
Local, I'm going to give a pitch. Local, sort of artisanal coffee roaster here in New Orleans, and it was just provided that by my family.
Yeah, no, and I mean, if you think about that, right? I mean, cherry coffee roasters in New Orleans. I mean, it's single origin. This is super high end. It's a modern cafe. Lots of, I mean, the digital version of that might be you carry that with you as part of who you are, your brand, the values that you have, and you'll pay a little bit for the digital representation. And when you go to the physical store, they'll give you credit for that for actual coffee.
Okay.
Right. So you see the ad in Meta, right, in the metaverse, right, and you like it, and that might give you some points for liking it and creates a loyalty system. And so what Facebook's really trying to do is they anticipate that this metaverse economy is going to be so huge because we have digital and physical representation, and they can bridge the gap between the digital and the physical capabilities. And that's what's going to give them the ability to go out and build more ads. Right? It's ultimately about more ads, and they have to figure out placement. And because they can get to a scale where you place that ad in every digital world, or you place that ad in every digital environment, right, and bring that back into an analog world, now you have a very, very interesting economy. So that's really what's going on there.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. But I mean, there are a lot of storm clouds on the horizon for Facebook. Yes, they print money right now, as any mature company will do, but the younger people aren't on the main platform. Even Instagram is not what it once was, and all these revelations about just basically bad behavior on their part, pursuing toxic business models that actually cause people harm. Do you anticipate a regulatory backlash of some kind?
They're trying. Right. I mean, it's very hard. So to create that backlash, I mean, it's a private company. Let's start at the very basics, right? It's a private company. It's a private network. You chose to join. You gave up your rights when you joined, right? And as part of you giving up your rights, that this is what occurs. Now, what can government do? They can do a couple of things. I mean, back to the regulatories we were talking about earlier. We can do a few things. I mean, overall, the government can protect us by making personal data and private data a property right. And what that means is your genomics, your digital exhaust, all the things that cascade from that, that becomes a property right. So we have land titles for your home and property, like real property. We have, I don't know, patents and trademarks for your intellectual property and
Well, this
ideas.
is actually, let me stop you there just for a sec, because this is a fascinating point. I was working for a while with a company called Humanity, which basically made the argument that, back in the day, there was no such thing as intellectual property. So if you wanted to take a printed copy of something Dickens wrote and get on a boat to come to the US, there was absolutely no restriction on your ability to profit from just duplicating that. And it wasn't until intellectual property laws came along that people said, hang on, these things also deserve protection as property rights. And I think what you're suggesting is that personal data might be the next wave of that.
I'm definitely saying that. And what Richie at Waru and the Humanity.co team on the back end were talking about was really making personal property, personal data, a property right. And the beauty behind that is that instead of fighting all the places to create a certain, the 31st right, I think that's what they were kind of championing at the point.
Right.
You have existing property laws that are there. So all you have to do is just make personal data a property right, and then all the laws cascade out into all the countries and everywhere else. There's nothing else you have to change. There's not a lot of changes that occur. You just declare personal data as a property right, and you need value exchange and permission and consent if you want to use someone's personal data. And so I think that would change one thing. But the second thing is something that's happening in legislation somewhere in Congress. Someone's made a proposal for data portability, right? And data portability is pretty cool. If we think about what happened when we had, phones, cell phones, we wanted to switch from one carrier to another. They're like, oh no, you have to change your complete number. Like, what? I can't take my number with me. And so what government was able to do is say, hey, look, we have number portability laws. But this is going even one level below that. Imagine if your contacts, your interactions, all your history, your whole timeline had to be moved from Facebook to whatever social network you want it, and you can swap social networks wherever you go, right? You might lose contacts because other people aren't in those networks, but you would still keep the data because if they were to ever join that network, that would just light up and just pick up where it left off. Now that would be highly, well, bad for Facebook, but highly competitive, allowing new social networks to be formed.
Right. Well, one of the things that you observe in the book, and I tend to agree, is that there's just not enough competition. The way the systems are set up is it's so hard for newbies to break in. And there's some very disturbing evidence from the world of entrepreneurship that founding rates are down. And it's this weird sort of, there's plenty of capital, as you pointed out. But somehow we haven't set up the incentives so people are taking that capital and doing something super useful with it.
Yeah, and that's part of it, right? All that money sitting on the side, like how do we actually make it work? How do we make it powerful? That's just it's really about where people want to redeploy capital, and we're going to see that shift, right? Where organizations and mission and purpose are being activated. We're seeing more alignment with what people in the areas that they believe, and I think that does change kind of the investing environment over time. But right now, it's because individuals, like one individual can do a lot. There's so much control, so much power at your hands because of the technologies. You can make a big impact, good or bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, technology just amplifies, right? So one of the theories that I've been very intrigued by, and it kind of connects to where you land toward the end of the book, is Carlota Perez's theory of technological bubbles and booms and then golden ages. And in a nutshell, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but what she basically says is that in human history, there have been 5 previous times when there's been this great leap forward in terms of productivity. So the Industrial Revolution, the railroads and canals, the invention of the steam engine, those kinds of things. And what she says is that one of the core features of capitalism is capital flows wildly and speculatively into these new technologies. And it's irrational. And the reason it's irrational is exactly what I was talking about before, which is like entrepreneurship 101 doesn't apply here, right? But what that does that's beneficial is it creates the infrastructure upon which the next generation of development lands. So if I were to draw the analogy to the late 90s when we were building out the internet, the fast broadband optical cable, Thomas Friedman world is flat kind of infrastructure, most people didn't make money. Those that made money made a lot of money. And so everybody's in there putting their money in the hope they're going to be the ones to grab the brass ring. And so one of the things I wonder is if we're in this kind of moment where the digital giants are just soaking up so much capital, building out that infrastructure, right? The digital networks, the data-driven digital networks, as you like to say. But maybe the next act, it goes beyond that and says that's actually going to be the infrastructure for the next generation, and it's not going to be in private hands.
I actually think that's happening, and that's okay. So we're kind of like joking about the metaverse, right, with Facebook and Meta, but the reality is we are starting to see that. We're starting to see the decentralization infrastructure that's in place. We're starting to see that, and it's happening first with banking and financial services.
Oh yeah.
Shashi asked this question about what is the influence you see on cryptocurrency economy, on the new digital economy architectures, and that's part of it, right? Our ability to do direct payments. We can pay directly to each individual. We can decentralize currencies. We have alternative currencies with no regulators in between. You're going peer-to-peer transactions already with Bitcoin ATMs and direct payment options that are happening. That's massively changing how commerce is going to be conducted and the role of central banks. I mean, do I really need a central bank? Yeah, yes, for some reasons, but if you're not the dominant world currency or you're not one of the dominant world currencies, you're better off having a country-backed crypto and a digital currency that will save you so much money on all the paperwork. I mean, that alone will give you a 30% savings in almost any economy. And so we'll see things like that. But let's take that a little further. I'll give you an example of another type of model or the ecosystems. Let's go to the loyalty points one, right? That one this is my favorite. About 4.5 years ago, I wanted to put together a group of investors to buy Air Canada's mileage program called Aeroplan. And I love points, right? This is me. Like I travel a lot. You know, I used to do 400,000 or 500,000 miles a year, right? I stayed in like all different hotels and things like that. And I just love points. Like it's a great loyalty program. But what is a point system, especially for travel? It's tax-free, it's cross-border, value exchange, funded at a penny per mile. And you redeem them. Like 25,000 miles gets you a $400 ticket. It's about a 1.6 cent conversion rate. You buy magazines, it's 2 cents a mile for the redemption. You buy electronics, jewelry, or sporting equipment, that's 2.5 cents typically. So you don't lose money on mileage programs. CFOs don't like it. It's like vacation days. You put the liabilities on the books. But banks pay hundreds of millions of dollars to participate and buy miles for their credit cards and all their other assets that they have. So here's what I really want to do. I'm not interested in the 10 million Canadian flyers, though they're very outstanding citizens. That's not the issue. What I want to get access to is 762 million Star Alliance passengers. If I took that cryptocurrency, once again, funded at a penny per mile, and turned that into the world's largest cryptocurrency on day one, I'm going to collapse travel, media, retail, entertainment, and banking into one network of 762 million people. We would be the biggest cryptocurrency on day one. It's not a Ponzi scheme. It's funded a penny per mile. There's no Ponzi scheme here. It's a funded currency. And more importantly, on day two, I would be the world's largest ad network, an affluent ad network of 762 million people, first party data. Forget all these things about the cookie apocalypse is here. No, we have the biggest ad network and everyone's given permission. And here's the interesting ESG on number 3. The good we could do is take 2.3 billion people who are unbanked and make them bankable. They now have the ability to transact with each other without usury, without weird banking laws in between, without people serving as middle people that are taking and adding no value. And we can give these people the ability to enter the global economy. Right? This is the cool stuff, right? So
that's really visionary. So are you thinking of doing something like that?
I don't know. Remember, we're talking about creating a startup. Let's go.
I'm in. I could do.
Let's go build this thing. So,
I think that would be very, very cool.
I'd be in. I'm in.
So, one of the things that you have raised a concern about, and we'll have to carry that conversation on after this, is creating an equilibrium that balances the pace of innovation, free market competition, profit, and personal freedom. And I think each of those elements, the pace of innovation. I mean, I see it. Some people are excited by it. They love it. They're getting ahead of it, but it's leaving a lot of people kind of behind. I work with a ton of companies who I would describe as one I was just with the other day does a build. They create building supply, basically things that go on buildings, And they're like, oh, people have bought this particular product for, hundreds of years. Nothing's going to change, blah, blah, blah. And they've got this real mindset of, we're going to do what we've always done. And I said, well, what would you do if Google decided to get into your business? And they're like, why would Google want to do that? I said, because if you're putting, like, say, roofs or something on a building, there's enormously valuable data, as you've already talked about with your smart cities concept. And Google can afford to give away the roofs and, thrive on the data. And they all kind of looked at me like, they give away the product? I'm like, uh-huh. I mean, I'm not sure if I'll ever be invited back to have a conversation with those folks again, but it really is something to think about, right? Because traditional economics don't apply in a case like that.
It is, because what happens is the business model you're in and the monetization model you're in are so different. Like, it's not like you're selling more building supplies or more roofing tile or more, might be selling more beams or frame structures or framing equipment. Like, that's not the business, right? The business is now more digitized. And so the physical manifestation is a means of creating the data, right? And it's a way of actually capturing the data. So I'll put a roof up if I'm getting more data about energy management in a decentralized energy grid, right? So I might even give you the free roof because I need to capture the data.
Yeah.
And people forget that, right? Those are the giveaways. And it's a great point, right? The balance has to happen. And part of it is because, companies are so fractured into silos of what an industry is, or I'm in the construction business. What does that mean? I'm not in that business. Oh, wait, yes, sure you are. Let's explain why. And so they haven't taken a chance to look at both the ecosystem in terms of how the cash is actually generated. So the capital flows are important, but they also need to take a look at the data flows, because what's happening is upstream, downstream data all become very important. And the question is, where do those data ecosystems are? And so the data-driven digital networks, which you started this conversation with around DDDNs, are those platforms. Those platforms give you the ability to think about multi-sided data platforms. So what are my demand signals? How am I catching them? What are my supply chains and how they're being shaping on supply? How does that impact pricing? And what does that mean on the ad rate for a view? Whoa, what happened here? Like, every business is going to come down to this, right? And so I don't care if you're selling roofing supplies. I'm in the energy management business. I'm looking at decentralization of energy production and decarbonization. We're playing a different game here, right? You just happen to be a supplier into that market. And as a supplier, there are probably 20 I can choose from. So are you in or out on this partnership is really what those digital giants will say.
Well, right. So toward the end of the book, you talk about backlash. And I think I see this in every sort of history of if you look at business history and companies.
Yes.
General Electric was invincible, right? And there was a period where you could not get down the hallway at the Columbia Business School without reading cases about Dell. And the magic of having negative working capital, or no, positive working capital.
Positive working capital.
And
MMT
Nokia,
wasn't invented yet.
Nokia, remember Nokia? Everybody was like, oh, Nokia. And so there's this sort of, I think, in the moment when a company is really dominant, there's this tendency to think that they figured it out, and they figured it out forever. So when I was writing my last book, which I would have been writing it in 2018, and I started it with my skepticism about Facebook, and my editor was like, you think Facebook's going to get into trouble? And I was like, yeah, because all the signs were there, right? But because the company was and is quite a dominant player, people don't see it. But you talk about a life cycle where you're going to have this backlash where people are saying, the social pollution, the concentration of power, the lack of sharing the benefits is going to eventually pile up to the point where there is a refutation of this model, if you will.
It is. And I mean, if you think about where we are today, most organizations typically go through these rise and falls, and where companies actually decline and they get the declinership. I would say, it's the way you were able to pick out Facebook and those signs of where those potential failures were. That's what we should be looking at of where the digital giants are. I think you could apply the same model that's in your book to look at, where is Apple in that cycle? Where's Google in the cycle? Where's Amazon? And you might see something pop up 5 to 10 years from now. What I'm most interested in is thinking about antitrust in a different way. Right now, antitrust is heavily politically driven, and I think that's the wrong way. When you have like a district attorney in DC, like, we're going to sue Amazon for lowering everybody's prices. You're like, oh my God, dude, are you running for office? Like, what's going on here? Right. But when we get to a point where the competition is being squashed. Competitors being bought out just to take them out of the market. There's less innovation. Your prices are going up. You're not getting like free services like in mapping or translation or all these wonderful things that you've been able to enjoy over the last few years, right? Or when suddenly your free speech is being squelched, or suddenly you don't have the ability to make choices because the technology is constraining your freedoms, right? That's when we have a problem. Now, we don't want to wait till it's too late to get there, but we need to have active monitoring of these trends to say, where are we? And I think that's where the government can play a role, right? And I'm saying this as a free market capitalist who happens to live in California, but I'm a free market capitalist. I actually believe that is the purest and most efficient way to actually manage a commonwealth of self-interest, right? And that's really what's going on. And when you distort that self-interest, is what we've been doing over the last 20 years, you get some very bizarre results. But if we get back to that pure model at a basic level, we should be regulating, creating the regulations and monitoring where we are in terms of where we are from an antitrust level. And then that would give us some kind of capability to say, okay, now we've hit the threshold. Now, the good news is none of these digital giants will be able to get into healthcare or financial services or other industries because the lobbyists from those industries are like, oh, no, you're not coming into my industry. We'll create this whole antitrust stink and we'll create this whole chaos in the marketplace. So you do have other forces at work that are serving as other levers, which is other industries realizing that they don't want to be part of that demise.
Very interesting. But you talk about, so smart regulation, you talk about having digital platforms as public goods, and there is conversation, that some of these things fall into the same category that the telephone service was regarded as falling into decades ago, where to operate this, or electricity, right, to operate this business, which is a natural monopoly, you need to provide universal service, you need to provide certain kinds of goods, you need to provide certain kinds of equitable access in order to have this protected position. I mean, that was a very strongly held belief I remember reading up on monopoly theory years ago, and it was that there are these things that are natural monopolies. And essentially what you argue is that if you are capable of building one of these digital DDDNs, that you essentially create monopoly conditions. And so it's not a huge intellectual leap to go from how electricity gets regulated to how some of these digital things get regulated. Is that sort of where you're going with that?
I am. So we talk about the rise of digital giants. We talked about the height of digital giants. We talk about the decline and then the fall. In the fall, that's when all these structures become public goods and we see a renewal where we build on top of those infrastructure over time. Now, you don't have to wait for the fall to occur. Let's look at India, right? The UPI model is amazing, right? They set the digital standards for what digital payments would be so that everybody in the country could be banked. I mean, that's pretty awesome, right?
And that was the Infosys guys. That was Nilikani, right?
Nandan did that, and he's in the behind that, setting it all up, and that's pretty wild, right?
The other one that's fascinating to me in India is the way that Reliance got into the cell phone market with the Geo product. I mean, talk about long term. I mean, they snuck in with a license that wasn't really a wireless license, and then they kind of made it into that, and then they then they basically revolutionized the wireless infrastructure in India. I mean, it was like, and that's a private company doing that, not the kind of public effort that Nandan led.
Yeah, so Mukesh is one of our clients.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I didn't.
And it's in the book. I think the most we can disclose is what's in the book. But you're absolutely correct, right? I mean, they saw the data economy before everyone else. And so when they gave away the phones and the data and gave so much data away for such a low cost, all the other carriers were appalled, right? They thought they were making money on voice, and Mukesh understood they were making money on data. And when you have 300, 400 million people in the network, right? What do we have? We disintermediated the customer account control. We built the biggest network of devices that's there. They're monetizing on data. They have digital monetization models on entertainment. Reliance Entertainment has a film or a movie that pops in there. And then the last piece is he can go ahead and invest long-term capital. We made the suggestion that if you shut down the Indian market for access, but force Western companies to come in, right, at paying you to invest in to get access to the Indian market, you could pay for a lot of this. And I think that's what they ended up doing.
I think, yeah. What's also amazing to me about that particular project is how secret it was. I mean, it
was very secretive.
But over about like 10 years, right? I mean, patient. working on it. And there's a human aspect to it too, which I like, which is apparently his daughter was home from Princeton or something, and he was like, Dad, the phone service here is terrible. Why don't you do something about it? Which I thought was kind of a charming human angle to that whole story.
Yes, the phone service was bad. Now India has a really good network, and that's part of it, right? I mean, you can do so much from Spectrum auctions, but what they've done there is incredible. So
yeah, really amazing. So how do you work with companies? I mean, I think people would be interested to learn about, if you would get involved. And then there was also a question about what would you say for traditional small and medium-sized enterprises trying to digitalize. So where do we even start?
Well, let's start with that question, right? SMEs, we have to think about where they play in that data economy, right? We think about where a DDDN fits and what part of data you're providing to that data-driven digital network. And that's where the partnerships occur, because if you're doing something, you're capturing data or you're acquiring a larger network that another DDDN can't get to, you have value. Right? You can be a partner. If you don't, you're just going to be disintermediated. And so that's where SMEs have to be very careful to see where their value is. And sometimes what you do is you bet on Google because they're competing with Amazon, right? Or you bet on Amazon because they're competing with Facebook, right? In whatever monetization. Or you bet on Tesla because Tesla is ultimately competing with your biggest competitor who happens to be insuring automobiles, right? And you're like, wait, how did that work? Well, Tesla's doing its own insurance, right? So you're playing these different roles. And that's the idea, is you have to understand how those monetization models have changed and how they fit within your business model and their business model. Now, to answer your earlier question, Rita, how you work with us? I mean, we typically come in and we set the stage for this kind of conversation. We say, here's what's possible. Then what we try to do is apply. We have 7 steps that we normally apply for existing companies instead of digital giants. The 2 that we're missing in this conversation was the first one, which is really about changing the life cycle of organizations. You have to do 5 things around how you get started: your mission, your purpose, your talent networks, what your offering looks like, your monetization models, and then, of course, the way you look at your capital and your long-term investors and shareholders, because you have to flip their thinking for that to work. And if you don't do those 5 things, we can't even have a conversation about all this change you want to do, because those are foundational, making sure you have the right DNA to compete with the digital giant. The 6th thing...
That's talent. So just run through those one more time: talent, governance.
Yeah, so let me walk through its mission, purpose, right? So, when you started out a company, it's like the coolest mission, like how are we going to build something, change the world? Then you go out and find the best talent. You bring these talent networks in place. Then you go out and you create a great offering using awesome design, a product or service or experience. And then from there, you figure out markets. Do we go to this industry? Do we go to this geo? Do we hit this market size opportunity? And then you go public and everything goes to crap, right? It's profit per employee, revenue per, it's like, revenue per employee, profit per sale. You get into all the financial metrics. And yes, you do have to do that as a publicly traded company. But by the time you're 40 years in, some companies middle age out and people forget the mission. They forget why they're there. There's layers of management that do nothing. And like, what do we do here? That's where we have to revisit the life cycle. And we have turnaround catalysts that we look at, right? So if you come back with an owner-operator PE firm that comes in, you can actually change, rethink the mission and purpose. Think bigger TAM. Right? Think a different kind of purpose. Go after the market that's not obvious. Reframe how you look at this. Then we can actually fund the people by resetting the cap table so that you can get the right talent back and reshift the talent, build the networks, renew the organization. And then we apply new technologies in the offering. That's the turnaround catalyst, like new technologies, the cloud or AI or mobile or something in there that's going to change your offering and get into the market in a different way. And then we start thinking about data flows, right? The monetization into markets. How do we do that? We talked about those multi-sided platforms and networks. And then the last piece is you have to re-educate. You have to re-educate your investors. They have to believe in that long-term vision. Otherwise, you're never going to get close.
No. Well, it's interesting you say that, because I see so many companies really hemmed in by the metrics that their investors are used to measuring them on. So if you take 2 of my favorite examples, Verizon and AT&T, some critic once said, every time the cicadas come out to play, a telecom company thinks it wants to become a media giant, which I thought was funny. But a big part of what they were up against was, there's a very settled set of measures that you measure a telecom company on, things like ARPU, and these media properties were completely outside the realm of that. So I think this notion that you have to really educate your investors is important. And, a stellar case of that was Adobe. when they made the transition from on-premises software to software in the cloud, I think their CFO did not sleep for 40 days and 40 nights. I mean, he was out there every day explaining this.
It was the most brilliant transition, Adobe, because they faked the market on cloud. They never delivered on cloud software, but they delivered on a subscription revenue plan and called it cloud. I give them the biggest credit for pulling the most amazing transformation. The street had no clue they had on-premises software. Nothing was in the cloud. It's not fraud at all, right? But it's just amazing how they're like, oh, it's going to be a subscription business model. And everyone's like, oh, they're in the cloud. I'm like, no.
People
so they get a lot of credit.
Things don't have to go together, right?
Nope, they don't. And that's what was the brilliance of this. I had to give that guy credit. That was brilliant. What was interesting, though, about telecom is we actually comms, media, entertainment, and telco to be really the same industries. You have a digital asset, you place that digital asset into a network, and that network actually gets spun out. That's your distribution network, right? And it's really about taking that and then monetizing against that network, and then ultimately figuring out how to build those customers against that. So whether they're selling a software title or a live stream or a video game or music, they're really in the same business when we actually deconstruct it. And that's why we say there's collapsing industries around digital business models and digital flows. Those digital flows are really important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then so I talk about industry being much less relevant as a unit of analysis. And when I work with clients that I consult with, one of the first things they always say is, well, have you had any experience with the haptic enabled widget industry or whatever it is? And I'm like, well, some maybe, but that's actually not why you want to bring me in. You want to bring me in for a fresh perspective, right? And I think that's part of what we find when people get very hemmed in by this industry focus, and they don't see things like, I'll give the roof away to get the data flows. They just don't even see it.
I want to know, honestly, were their minds blown when you said that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it hadn't even crossed their mind that would be a possibility. And I said, look at some other cases where people are literally giving away products just so that they can get access to, giving away phones, giving away. A great one in healthcare is Flatiron Health, that basically give away oncologist office management systems. I mean, if an oncologist office had to pay for these things, it would be, I don't know, unbelievably expensive for each office. But what Flatiron realized, and these two guys that founded this company are absolutely brilliant, from my alma mater, Wharton, but what they figured out was that if they could get a critical mass of oncologists' offices to be using the same software and hardware platform, they could then take that data and do incredible things with it. And they are, and I think that's a great example to me of a force for good, right? Because what they're trying to do is take relatively obscure data about, cancer patients, and by aggregating it, you can actually see the patterns. You can start to see what works, what therapies are in use, what therapies are not. What's the irregularity in treatment? Because one of the fascinating things they found was that there is no standard treatment. Like if you can present with the same set of diagnoses and symptoms and everything else and get wildly different recommendations for what you should do about it, especially with these more rare forms of cancer, which I think is absolutely fascinating. But they realized, right, that you did that. So no, my building supply guys were kind of what? The other thing we had a big conversation about was, okay, so a lot of their clients, their customers, are undergoing a generational transition from, you go and have a beer with the customer and you talk beams and roofs and, thicknesses and latencies and all that stuff. And, you'd form this friendship and they'd buy you tickets to NASCAR and, that kind of stuff. And I was like, I don't think my kids are going to be interested in doing business that way. They're going to want to and all that. And so in addition to the business model being different, I think the whole kind of interface with the customer and the way that they want to interact is going to end up being very different.
No, it is. And let's roadmap your oncology example. In the longer term, given that they're a force for good, what they actually can do is aggregate payment data for contract negotiations against the payers. And by doing that, they can actually get better reimbursement rates and more distributed reimbursement rates. Today, we don't have price transparency, but they're actually going to be sitting in front of that price transparency data.
Eventually. And there's some interesting examples of healthcare where I think it was was it Utah State? One of the big university connected hospital systems had a new chairman who happened to be a woman, and she said, "I want to know what it costs us for each procedure." And everybody in the system was like, "What? You want to know about what?" And when they actually dug into it, what they found was, certain practitioners were 3 times more expensive than others for the same thing, that certain operations were more expensive for the same thing. And she was like, "Well, why?" But if you don't even have the basic data to find that out, then you can't really make an intervention.
Yeah, Dr. Vivian Lee was really pushing hard for that, and I'm glad she
That's
did. I mean, look, user and customer care, usual and customary, I think that's what they call it for pricing, has been going on for so long. It's in a cost plus system. It's hard to figure out what the heck anything costs, along with all the discounts and negotiations. Very, very bizarre.
Yeah, I read about that in the book too. And the case I used there is Caterpillar, where they gave the job of negotiating their prescription drug pricing to this brilliant guy who came from the world of supply chain. And he viewed the whole thing as a supply chain problem. And his goal was eliminate waste, which I thought was fascinating and very successfully, very successful. So how do, yikes, we're running out of time. How do people learn more? How do they get smarter about this?
Yeah, I think, we've got different resources that are out there. You can kind of check out things on our website, www.constellationr.com. I think Jacora put out some resource links in the comment section. So you can follow me at raywang.org. So RAYWANG. Just ask questions. Ask me stuff on LinkedIn. Happy to answer them if you've got ideas. I know there are a lot of questions here we didn't necessarily get into, but happy to answer them and follow up. Just connect me on LinkedIn and say that you're on Rita's show, and
awesome.
I'm happy to carry that back. It's the conversation and discussion. I mean, that's really why we put together the event that we have. We do this once a year where we bring in folks to really talk about where these changes are occurring, and that's what happened there. And if you go to, I don't know, actually, you know what? Here's a really good resource. Go to shinyredphoto.com. You'll see all the graphical recording boards from all the sessions we had at our event, and you'll be able to see them. There'll be these big boards that were drawn out by Two Line Studios, a good friend of ours for the last 11 years, and you'll see every discussion we had. And there's about 48 sessions that are there, and you can see all the conversations in these different areas about collapsing industries, new sets of technologies, what's going on. And we'll try to post one every week from there, but you can see all of them at once at shinyredphoto.com under our conference. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That is great. Well, so you and I have a conversation to pick up on after this. But for now,
which startup? Which startup is that we're going to start?
But for now, thanks so much for spending the time with us. And so, everybody, the book is "Everybody Wants to Rule the World: Competing in Surviving and Thriving in the World of Global Giants." It's a terrific book, very thought provoking. And what I like is you kind of dig under a lot of the orthodoxy. Like if you pick up Business Week or Forbes or something, there's all these surface level observations, but you're kind of digging under and looking at what the real mechanics of how these things work operate. So it's been terrific. I've enjoyed this and love getting to know you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to the audience here. I really, really appreciate your time today. So happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Enjoy the weekend. I'm going to be in New Orleans, which I don't think you can say.
I can't. I love New Orleans. Let me know how things are in New Orleans and the food, because that's really why everyone's in New Orleans.
Totally. We've got a whole weekend of reservations made. So I'm very excited about that. So have a great time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.